So the aim of today is for an awards application workshop. So I am going to be asking you some questions and we'll be giving you an opportunity to work through a few things. But before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge that this session is hosted by LEWA and the University of Notre Dame, where I'm sitting today. And as part of that, the Association for Learning Environments Western Australia chapter acknowledges the traditional custodians throughout Western Australia and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their cultures, and to elders both past and present. And I would like to acknowledge that today I am standing on Whadjuk Noongar land. And I invite you to also share the country on which you are standing today as you participate in this. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up or pop it in the chat.
Thanks, Lara. I'm also on Whadjuk Noongar Budja in Perth.
So am I. I'm at Whadjuk Budja Noongar.
So I do have some slide sets, a slide deck prepared. And as I said before, the aim of this session was to act as a prompt and a catalyst in the preparation of the awards program. And so there are a number of tasks that I'm happy to guide you through. For those who are with friends, I am happy to open up a room for you to go into, Jack and Paris, if you wish, or you can work independently and then maybe swap notes later on when you meet each other back in the office. But before I leap into this, I just want to perhaps check in with you guys about what your expectations were from this workshop and give you an opportunity to ask any specific questions you have about the awards process while I've got Soraya, who is the Regional Awards Coordinator, in the room. I haven't given you all an opportunity to introduce yourself, but I am hoping that that is okay, because today is really about you and your reflections on your project. But if you would like to introduce yourself, you're also more welcome. And to do that, I might just ask Soraya to introduce herself in the first instance.
Thanks, Lara. So my name's Soraya Ramsey. I'm the awards coordinator for learning environments. So I run the awards and I assist the chapters with their awards programs as well. So if you do have any technical questions about the awards, you're welcome to ask me. Sometimes it's easier to have a conversation rather than send a long-winded email. So I'm always on the phone if you need to check in with me. As I said before, I am in Perth, so yeah, just be aware of the time differences. And yeah, I look forward to seeing all your entries.
Now, I might ask if people have questions, maybe you give a brief introduction to yourself before you ask the question, and pop your hand up and we can go around and get those sorted for you. I have a question for you all. Are you happy for me to proceed as I have, I guess, broadly outlined, which is just asking a series of prompting questions and really giving you an opportunity to collate your thoughts and think about how you might respond to these questions, which are focused around some of the areas within the awards criteria that are perhaps a little bit trickier to answer or challenging to answer, and typically those are around the narratives of the project. Great, thanks Tilly, thanks Jeff. I am also assuming then that with some of the other criteria that you're familiar with the awards criteria and that you don't need me to run through those today, and that with some of those other criteria, such as the project details and things, that you're sorted with that, and any questions that you have may be directed to Soraya via email. And Soraya, perhaps you can pop your email address in the chat just to be sure so people have that. The first, I guess, prompting question that I have, and it was interesting to go through the criteria and pick out some of these keywords and things. So for the project yourself, before we get into the specific criteria, select 3 keywords that define or explain the project that you are submitting for the awards. I've got 5 minutes there. I don't think we'll need 5 minutes. If I was in the room with you, I'd be looking to see when you'll look up from your pieces of paper. But what I might do is just ask you to just unmute and say ready, or send me a reaction if you wish. Oh, it is a new one.
I'm not sure what to do, what to enter. Is it just oral, or do we
Oh, it's
text
more of a
from-
personal reflection, Jeff. Ideally, you'd be sitting next to someone and you'd be talking through this, but at the moment, you're just having a good chat to yourself. Sorry, the other assumption that I have made is that you have all come to this with a project in mind that you would like to submit for the awards. If that's not the case, or if this isn't the type of support you're expecting for the awards, then I would respectfully suggest that you may not get much out of this session. You're more than welcome to stay. But the aim of this session was to, for everyone in the session, to really give you an opportunity and a prompt to work on your submission.
Lara, my reason for joining in was we entered in the national, regional in Christchurch, but weren't successful in that. And I just wondered whether we can enter in the West Australian one this time, because there wasn't one last year. Is that right? Can we re-enter? And I just wanted to get some feedback on how we can improve our entry, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So I think, Soraya, I might let you ask the first part of that question.
Yeah, so you are welcome to re-enter into the WA Chapter Awards and also into next year's Regional Awards.
Jeff,
Okay.
is the project in Christchurch or is it in WA?
No, it's in
It's a
WA.
WA
Okay,
one.
cool. Yeah,
It's a WA one, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
great.
I just basically just wanted feedback on how to improve the submission.
So the other question then that I might ask, I might just change tact again. How many people in the room today have been judges or on a jury?
I have, yes, Jeff.
Yep. And how many have been part of a successful application? Like how many have won an award? Christine? And Jeff's been on the jury, and I can see Tilly typing, but no Brent's typing. It might be easier just to call out if that's... So I've got...
No, I haven't.
No, okay, Jeff. Yeah, cool. So for those who have won an award, this is going to be a slightly cheeky question. Oh, actually, no, I will defer to Jeff first. Jeff, as a member of the jury, of a jury, what were the elements of the award presentations or the award submissions that really helped you understand the project and the nature of the award, the nature of the entry itself?
Oh, it goes back a few years to when we first started the awards, and I was chair of the jury then.
Yeah.
And it was really about the impact it had on
Mhm.
the school, what the issues were, and how it was resolved through the project.
Yeah. And did you have a good understanding of that impact from the words that were submitted or from the images that were submitted, or was it a bit of both? Were there certain aspects about the photos perhaps that helped you?
Well, the difficulty is that you can't visit them. I guess that's where you really pick up, if you like, the vibe of it. So when it's done remotely, and while you can put a video together, I mean, that's fairly subjective in a way. So I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity for the jury in some way to visit the sites, or at least have a bit more of an opportunity to experience what's actually happening there, and talk to the people about, the before and after, because I really think that's what it is, that you've improved the quality of the built learning environment, and there's an impact that you can measure in some way.
I think that that's a useful suggestion to make, and I suspect that that's not for the first time that suggestion has been made. There is an awards committee that is meeting next week, I think, and I can take that to the awards committee. But once again, it's not the first time that's been raised, and there are a number of reasons, particularly for the regional awards, that visiting the sites is very, very difficult.
And also for the McConnell as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I wonder then is, on the assumption that the sites can't be visited, and this year your sites can't be visited. I'm assuming, Soraya, we can't change that quickly. So what is it about the applications and the submissions that are made that help a juror understand that vibe that you're talking about, Jeff? What is it that people putting their submissions together, what is it that they can do to help with that?
Well,
and I think that's where the narrative comes in.
Yeah, that's really what I'm listening for.
Yeah, cool.
I'd like some advice.
Yeah, and that's where really where when we had put this, we're thinking about this seminar today, that's really what we identified as were the challenging things. So some of the prompting questions that I have, and I would recommend you take these back to the project team as well and do a kind of a collective or a collaborative submission, perhaps, if that's possible. And I hope that these questions are prompting and a catalyst for thinking about some of those. We've looked at the criteria that specifically relate to that experience and that vibe of being on site and thinking about how that might come forward. I do think also that there's been some changes in the submission, and you can submit an audio file or a video file if you wish, and there may be different ways in which that could be done. I would be suggesting that a video file might not just be, a movie might not just be a walk around the site, but might be around talking to people about their experiences on the site. And I think sharing experiences vicariously could be useful. Soraya?
Yeah, so that educational narrative doesn't have to be written, but there are a list of questions there which are quite directed towards the educational client and quite specific, looking for particular answers that's hoping that they will give in relationship to their response to how the briefing went and how the project has responded to it. So there are a list of questions. You're not sort of making it up.
No, exactly. And we had the slide deck that we had put through, and the questions, the prompting questions that I have of building on those. And I would recommend that if you're able to sit down with the stakeholders from your project or other members of the project team and ask these questions, and also look at the questions that have been prepared as part of the information pack for the awards, then that could be really, really useful as well. Because you're right, Jeff, it is really hard to get across the vibe and what it feels like to be in the place. But I do think that this is part of what makes these awards slightly different to some of the other awards that are around. So what I might do, rather than get you to actually do these, I might just quickly flick through these so that you can see the type of questions that we were asking. And then if you need more time later on, more than happy to talk through a few things. But we have this presentation that will be made available, and I can also make the PDF of these slides available if you need some more prompts for the questions. So the way in which we were thinking about it was, first of all, how do you define the project? I think the three keywords, and Tilly, your three keywords were quite a good example of teacher-driven risk-taking and early learning. That doesn't describe the project. It describes, I guess, the potential impact of the project itself, and perhaps the intent behind the design. And I think that's a really interesting lens to look through. The next task that we had identified is then, well, who are the people who are involved in the process? And this relates directly to a couple of those criteria as well. And thinking about during the briefing, thinking about who you spoke to, who were consulted, and when and why you spoke to them about, and then what records did you keep showing each of their involvements. And this, I think, is a useful question to remind you, or to remind people who are submitting for the awards, that this is an important part of that narrative. I find it quite interesting to hear people talking about their projects, and the process of getting the project up and running is as important as the final outcomes themselves. And I think this is also quite relevant for the innovation category, as well as the projects around specific types of projects. The third question that we had identified was then articulating what your thoughts are collectively around the learning and the pedagogy, because once again, this is part of the narrative. And I feel this is a big point of difference to perhaps some more design-orientated award programs that we might be more familiar with. So what types of learnings were you allowed for? How were they catered for within the design, and how did they influence the design process or the involvement of the people? For those who have, I think it was Christine, you have won an award. I might just pick on you if that's okay. When you were putting in your application for an award, were you able to include and perhaps unpack this for the jury in the narratives and the other information that you were submitted?
Yeah, so I guess like putting in an award, it was with a previous firm and it was a big team effort. With full-time communications marketing person working on it and architect writing the narrative and great photographs, and I think it is sort of a big team effort to get it over the line.
Did you work with a client group as well, or was it all the design team?
Client would have written, the statements that they needed to answer the questions and things, but pretty much that was all.
Cool. And it's interesting that you
sort of a while ago did one for the last awards in Christchurch, and we didn't win that one. It's with a new firm. So yeah, just a different process. So I guess I don't have an award in at the moment. This is more just for information, really, to listen in.
So I might wonder before I leap into it. So the suggestion that I guess we're making here about thinking about how you might define or explain the project, and then how you might talk about the people behind the project, and then how you might also talk about the pedagogy. And it's kind of nice that we've got a bit of an alliteration going on. So the people, the project, the people, and the pedagogy, and whose voices might come through in that. It is interesting, I think, Christine, thank you for sharing your experience about the awards submissions that you've done in. I don't think that that's particularly unusual, in that often these are driven by the design team. And I wonder, is it challenging to get the other stakeholders involved, given that for the particular design team, the project is occupied, it's no longer on your books, it's not part of your day-to-day professional lives? I'm seeking to better understand the barriers behind submission, as well as supporting those who do submit and are seeking to perhaps find a point of difference.
I think in my experience, it's submissions are a lot of work, and you don't necessarily have all of the collateral, and it's gathering those to sort of fulfill the criteria. And getting information out of a school, the client can be at that stage, if you're just trying to meet a deadline for a submission, if you don't already have the information from a client, I think that's quite hard to go back to the school and get that out of them. I think why my previous firm was so successful with, won a lot of awards, was the whole process of the design was a lot of stakeholder engagement and a lot of workshops and a lot of recorded things through the whole journey. So we had that story already without having to go back to the principal or someone and ask for a statement. It was already kind of there, and there were diagrams to show the journey, and we could talk about that in our design statement about everything we'd been through, which I think adds a lot of strength to a submission if you can talk about the school, the stakeholders, the involvement of the students, etc.
I think you raise a really interesting point in that in the sort of the daily work or the project work that you would do as a matter of course, as part of your fee, to put no too fine a point on it, some of that work can actually be useful when compiling your submissions. But of course, if it's not, and sometimes it's harder to capture. And so I fully understand, and it is really interesting that for these particular awards, when we're trying to capture a narrative or asking for a narrative, that can be difficult depending on how much time it has been since you're actually involved in that project. And this is an open question for everyone here, and I know that we have a couple of people from a client or a stakeholder point of view. I'm not going to name a name, Scott and Jeff. And I wonder then whether there's an opportunity as part of the normal project process for the design team to be able to embed within their processes the opportunity to capture narrative, say at the end of defects or something like that. Or part of a POE.
Sorry, was that something that you wanted me to sort of jump in on?
Well, I'm interested to hear how your voice, Scott, as a stakeholder, as a member of a school community, can be heard in the design process.
Yeah, so I suppose part of it, as we were saying before, was if it's built into the design process, teachers or directors of teaching and learning or students, they have that excitement and that anticipation of a new build happening, and they really want to get it right and get a good process or outcome from it. Once it's built, they're just in and using it, and trying to get something out is like drawing blood from stone. And so if it is something that you can build in right away from the start, or if it is something where you can link it as much as possible as something where the students can really benefit, teachers get on board so much quicker. Where students being able to see architects, they just love it. Like, you walk around with an architect and they're like, who's that? And that's great because lots of kids actually aspire to be in those sorts of roles as well. So if it is something where you can actually have that and take kids out to a different place or anything like that. So we did one for the Maths building, which was we took them out to Curtin University, put them in a different space and worked with them there with people and architects. And so there would be, then we captured that. So we had lots of different quotes, we had lots of different ideas, we had lots of things that they put into it. And that's all then already done. Like, that's all done from that day there and then. Getting something out after the building is in, I suppose, can be a lot harder. But I was thinking about this before, and part of it would be being really specific and really sort of small with what you might want. So almost it would be talking to the director of teaching and learning, or talking to whoever's been involved with it a bit more and saying, we would like this and this. And just super simple, super small, because then that can at least be something you could put into it. Or even trying to pull strings where we would really like some student quotes, and the students are going to be recognising their sort of quote by this person. And sometimes that's something you can put through to, say, Year 12 leaders or Year 6 leaders or something, where they really would like that and they love the idea of their name being published in an awards thing. And then teachers would be more willing to take the time to potentially do that as well. Much easier, as said, before the building's done and during that process, but can be done after.
Can I just make a comment about the process?
Yeah.
Some of them, the one project I worked on took 6 years. And at the beginning, I mean, when all the vision and the ideas come together, because you've got to get budgets together and a whole range of things, time elapses, and the key stakeholders who were the driving force behind the vision and the ideas, and the students you talk to and the teachers you talk to, when the project is finally finished and you start to put the submission together, those people aren't there anymore. I mean, quite often they're very brilliant people, and of course they get picked up by other schools. So, you know, it's not something that happens just within a few years. You know, 5 or 6 years is not long to start and embed a project. So in terms of being reflective after the project's finished, and you've got to wait until it's been used and a whole range of things. So you go back, and I went back to the school and just talking to some of the students there when we had a presentation. Many of them weren't there, weren't part of that. And so, and the ones who were had gone on. Now, wherever they've gone, you can't really track them down. So there's just a bit of a difficulty, I think, in terms of that sort of authenticating the stakeholders' involvement in it, because they're not there anymore.
I guess that's what I think. What I think Scott was saying as well, and that whole exactly what Jeff was just saying. That's the benefit of doing it while you're designing the project. So if you've had a meeting with a group of students and they've said we really want an open jungle gym or something, and you've recorded that and written it down, you can come back later with your submission and say, you know, in the stakeholder engagement with students in, 2022, the students requested an open jungle gym, and then you show a photograph of exactly, you're sort of showing that if you've recorded things through the process of, I think that makes it a lot easier, because to try and get it from a school at the end and go to a principal or someone and just say, oh, can you write us a statement about what you think about the school? Like yes, they often weren't involved, or it's really difficult.
I wonder also whether, and Sarara, I might defer to you because I don't have the criteria in front of me, but whether it's a matter of tense. What I'm hearing is it's difficult when the time of submission is difficult, perhaps, to find the information from the past, but would it meet criteria if it was the project was spoken about what it's like in the present?
From what I understand, the questions are, did the brief, or has the brief been met? So you are looking at, as Jeff has said, things, people who made decisions years ago, or maybe only 2 years ago, because building projects often take up to 3 years, longer with COVID. But and also the stakeholders change. So if you don't know what the brief was 2 years ago, but you've come to this point, and then you've got the 6 months of occupancy at least, then I guess it can be a bit complex unless, as you say, you've recorded, you've had a good experience of recording, sessions along the way with client interactions or workshops or such like that.
But even if I think about the questions that are still on the screen, and I'm happy to not show those, but I might use them while they're there, I wonder if those questions can be adapted and asked of the current occupants at the time of submission. So thinking about what types of pedagogy they do, how do they teach in these spaces, or how do the students learn in those spaces? What are the design elements that might support that specifically? And then how that last one through there about how they sorry, I'm struggling a little bit here, how the process involved the people. Perhaps that's more of a retrospective kind of thing, thinking about then, well, if they had been involved, or can they hear people's voices? That one's a little bit harder to do. But I'm wondering whether there's ways of capturing the stories from now that can still answer the questions about the design of the building, if the process of designing the building is not as easy to capture. Am I making any sense?
I think in that way, but at the moment, I think the educational narrative is written, and some of the assessment criteria are written in the way of has the brief been met by the current building project. So I think if stakeholders change, again, it's difficult for the entrants to answer that question. It's a barrier for sure.
I wonder then whether there's an opportunity to think about, and I'd happy for people in the room to tell me whether this is a sensible idea or not, but perhaps to think about the wording of the requests, the criteria that are being made. So there's an opportunity to say, rather than being so retrospective, looking for evidence now about the success of the learning spaces, for example.
I think so, especially given that we do ask for at least 6 months occupancy, and some of them are occupied for a bit longer. Certainly, I think you can determine whether or not it's successful or working, or if they needed to change things. So, I think you can still determine if it, for the client, if it's a successful project.
Yeah. So maybe there's some opportunity to reconsider the wording of the criteria. I don't know. We can put that.
Yeah, we can discuss that with the awards committee.
For those in the room who have perhaps been involved in submissions that were or were not successful, do you think that slight shift in wording would assist? No. Yep.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is the problem that you have with cameras on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it does
Um,
help, Lara, but at the end of the day, you can just frame it, I suppose, to your clients or the occupants however you want, and then they can give you as much or as little information as they see fit, and it's just up to you to kind of mould that into something that fits.
Yeah. And I guess, and my interest in this, which might be is slightly different to meeting the criteria of the awards, but I'm interested in how the different voices can be heard. And sometimes I do think that giving people an opportunity to have their voices heard, as Scott had implied, is a useful one, and this is a good opportunity for that, perhaps. But it depends on how to capture them. Cool.
Just the one thought that I had, which was around post occupancy. I've asked architects about this. A lot of it has been that post occupancy often doesn't happen. Trying to get to the building and actually review that, or chat to teachers that are in there as students. So maybe as well, this could almost be an impetus to do that, and to go, oh, maybe I'm wrong with that and it is happening, but I haven't seen it. And I know it could be an impetus basically to go, oh, okay, let's contact the school and say, can we walk around this afternoon? Can we do this? And then if you're there with them in person and you can write down 1 or 2 things that they've said and everything, you can see it in action or take some photos, that could almost be like that done afternoon.
Yeah, exactly.
Going in person is often much easier than getting email written responses as well.
And that was one of the motivations behind having a voice recording for the narrative, and the suggestion or the thought behind that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Soraya, but the thought behind that was that perhaps it was something that you had a conversation over the phone or over a coffee if it's face to face, and then you can record that and include that, because it is hard to get people to respond to emails, and I find that as soon as people have to type something, they start wordsmithing it, and it just takes a lot longer. And often the gold is in the spoken word, not in the typed word. That those impromptu kind of statements can be pure gold sometimes.
Yeah, I think the opening it up to a video or audio, certainly we're not expecting anything fancy. We're just expecting some answers to that educational narrative response. So you could do a quick video walk around with little questions about particular things to achieve that.
Rightly or wrongly, I'm still I'm just going to say I don't TikTok. I'm only on one social media platform. But I do know that lots of people do. So and most of those are in school at the moment, I think so. But there's an untapped resource, perhaps. Just because I've got the slides and it might make sense for those watching the recording, I'm just going to flick through these and then I'll stop sharing them, because the thought that we had about the other thing to think about, and this is sort of, I guess, in part of that conversation, is what is the evidence that you're providing? And so once again, this is about the voices that can be heard and how they might be told and who is providing it. There's some hints down there. I think drawings and photos do describe very well and words can explain, but I think the videos or audio can actually provide another opportunity to hear those multiple voices. So thinking about the kind of evidence that you have. The next kind of, the few tasks, I've got 3 tasks here that we were prompting to think about the different criteria. So thinking about the value and the role of the project relates directly to criteria B and E. And I guess here we were recommending that if you sit down with other members of the project team, perhaps beyond the design team, it would be interesting to find the value and the role that the project has had in the community, perhaps thinking about that relationship between project and pedagogy. So how the learners respond, how the teachers have responded, how the leadership has responded. I do find it interesting when people talk about their projects, the leadership can make a difference as well. So there's an opportunity to tell that story. And then finally, particularly for that innovation category, it's simply about how to do things differently. I don't know how this goes nationally, Soraya, but I do think that the innovation category is the one that has the least uptake. And it would be interesting to think about what it would take or how we could get people to share the innovative things that they're doing, because I don't think that it's not that they're not innovative, it's just that people don't necessarily share them. And then finally, that narrative thinking, as we've been talking about what it might be and who it might be as well. Yeah. So once again, that was about it. I am just going to stop sharing. How do I do that? Sorry, I'm more of a Zoom person. There we go. So like I said, we can make these slide decks available. People listening in or watching it, feel free to work your way through those if they're helpful for you. But in preparing this webinar, we had perhaps thought that some of the barriers are about finding those voices and being able to talk to those people, and then unpacking the experiences of the project. So that was kind of the plan. It didn't really work because, and we might try this again at another time, perhaps Soraya, and prompting people to bring a friend so they can talk through things. I am happy to stop talking. If anyone else has got any other questions or comments that you want to make or experiences you want to share, successful or otherwise. No.
Nothing from me. Thanks, though, Laura.
Jeff, I'm not sure in relation to your specific question whether that was remotely useful. I feel that in your practice and in your consultancies, you do a lot of those talking and a lot of that collation of perhaps some useful evidence.
Yes, I do, but it's been useful. And if I could get a copy of the points you put up, that's good.
Yeah.
What I want to do is go back through the submission that we put in and just see where it can be improved. You know, sharpen it up a little bit. That's really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because we'll submit the same project again for the WA Awards.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, I've been a juror a couple of times for the LEA Awards and the McDonnell Award, but I've also been a juror for the Institute Awards, and I think there's a difference between the two. And I do find for the LEA Awards, it is challenging, as you said, Jeff, to feel the experience of what it's like to be there. But also, I think it's also hard to hear the multiple voices at play in the projects. And I do think from my point of view, that's one of the most exciting things about the work that LEA members do is the collaborative nature to many of these projects. And it would be wonderful to see how those voices or hear how those voices can be heard in the submissions, whether it's in the photos or in the narratives or in the sound bites or the videos if they're sent through. It is very interesting, I think.
Yeah. Just a small point. When we go on a visit to a school, we're able to hear the people talk about the project and things like that, and you're there and you're walking around and maybe students are guiding you, so you have that opportunity to get deeper in and ask those questions. It's very hard to put that sort of information into the brief. So I think that's really what I'm saying is once you're on site, you're talking to the people who are using the space, you're looking at the students, you're asking them whether they feel valued now, because before it was terrible, hostile environment, and now it's lovely. We love being here. That's what you like to hear. That's something that I think needs somehow to come out in the submissions. I'm not sure how it happens, but that would be my point.
I don't know if this is useful or even if it's just a little naive, but I and for those who don't know me on the call, I am also an architectural educator. So I teach here at Notre Dame. I teach architecture, and we get our students to write in different voices. And it would be super intriguing, I reckon, for architects to have a go at writing with the voice of a child in the school, and to imagine what it's like to be that child running through the playground or, learning in the space, and writing it like you were a sort of a 6-year-old, if that's appropriate, or a 14-year-old sort of thing, just as an exercise to place yourself in their shoes, because we do watch them run around in the schools when we go back, and we can see them having fun, and it would be interesting to tell their story from their point of view. I don't know if that's too weird. I don't know if that's useful, but I think it would be fun. But anyway. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, not really. I think you've covered off on quite a bit of some of the, especially the barriers that people are finding to, doing the submission itself.
If there are any questions as well that anyone has of someone in education, also feel free to ask or email me as well. I'm happy to help out with that wherever I can.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. I mean, this is a little bit shorter than it was anticipated, so I'm gifting you back the hour.